Relax.
Okay.
Great. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting of the Seymour Board of Education. First order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. I do not see any members of the public, nor have I received any correspondence. But just for the formality of it, I will ask if there's any public comment. Going once. Any public comment going twice? I see no public comment going 3 times. Public comment portion of the meeting is over. Next item of business is discussion and possible action for the financial management summary, August 1st. Before I hand it over to Mr. Bucci, I want to say thank you for the narrative in this document. Clearly, as the first month of the fiscal year, there's not too much to report in the way of finances, but I appreciate the visibility into some of the procedures that you put in place for checks and balances according to really not the formal, generally accepted accounting principles. I'm not quoting Gatsby, but just logical, generally accepted ways to do finance. So thank you for that. And I welcome any commentary or further explanation for our committee and any questions.
Thank you, Kristen. The report actually is in 2 parts, and as you said, there isn't a whole lot to report in July, except that what I wanted to take the opportunity to do here, as you've noticed, is to talk about some of the things that we've done, because I really believe we are starting off this year with a really solid foundation. We've learned a lot from what we've had to encounter over the past 8 months or so, 9 months since I've been here. And we've made a number of changes that we think are going to be able to streamline this whole process. First of all, the system, and the town agrees with us, is very cumbersome, but we've been able to go through and to utilize some of the hidden features, not the least of which is, turning off a bunch of accounts that really serve no useful purpose. And in speaking with some of the school secretaries, what they've essentially said to me is, I came here and they gave me this thing and it has 400 accounts on it, and how am I supposed to know which ones to use? I sent out to each of the schools and the special ed department a simple Excel spreadsheet that had maybe 13 accounts on it. Those 13 accounts have budget numbers in them. They're school level accounts. That's their quote unquote discretionary money that they use to buy books and supplies and things throughout the year. It was very well received because it really simplifies their job. And when they have a question, they pick up the phone and they give a call. So this process that's gone on now for the month of July, which is really one of the busiest times of the year in the business office, where they're encumbering for books for the year and supplies for the year, and they want to make sure things are in place before the students come, was very smooth. And when there were questions, they called and they asked. We're going to be continuing with more of the same along that line. A couple of things that we've done. We're still struggling with this, but we're trying to take away from sort of the local control, and what I mean by that is the school level control, things relating to repairs of equipment and maintenance on the buildings and whatever. That's all getting centralized now through Tim Connors. He will then sit down with central office and we'll talk about the kinds of things that we can do. Of course, everybody had a wish list. We put all those things on the list, but you and I know, everyone knows that something's going to go wrong, and we're going to wind up spending our money on some fix that we have to make that we didn't anticipate.
Unexpected emergencies, though.
We have old buildings.
Which happen.
We have old equipment. This is a natural order of things. When we also set up the budgets, we sort of put in place the ability to be able to validate things against encumbrances and purchase orders. There were far too many check requests where we don't actually have an idea that something is coming in, and yet, because there was no purchase order, there was no encumbrance, and then all of a sudden you get a check request, which is of course after the fact, and now you sort of have to pay it. Another issue we're dealing with, and this actually just repeated itself, is where we get, for instance, a grant. And the grant provides for a special project of, I'll give you an example, a Perkins grant, where we may have available to us, let's say, the case of retrofitting the ambulance up at the high school for EMT training, or assumption that, well, if we're going to go spend $30,000 on a grant, that we have 10 grand to do electrical. Well, that's not really a great assumption, because that money has to come from somewhere. So while we're all for maximizing grants, I'm not for, unknown, local dollar commitments that we have to invest because our facilities, let's say, aren't accommodating or aren't prepared to accommodate. So we're working on that part. The second part, going forward, like I said here, I really believe we've gotten the system set up. Everybody seems to be embracing this idea that we have somewhat of an approval process, and that communication is key. And it's really gotten a lot better, and I will say that with minor exceptions, I mean, I said it was with mixed reviews, it's been with mixed reviews, but with minor exceptions. I think most people are very happy to see that they have some idea of what it is that they're supposed to do, because they're not out there to make mistakes. They're all working hard. It's just they have no guidance. The second part of my report is an update of the June results. The floodgates opened in July, all kinds of things came in, legal bills. I believe Dr. Compton distributed legal bills earlier today. We got legal bills in, for instance, for special education dating back to March that came in during the month of July. We booked $23,000 worth of special ed legal bills in the month of July. It's very difficult for us to know what is being incurred. One of the things Dr. Compton and I talked about was, now that we've consolidated the legal services in Bertram Moses, is to essentially have a meeting where we can talk about what is on the plate of the law firm relating to, for instance, special education issues. We know what's going on with Floyd with respect to collective bargaining, and we know that that's going to cost us some money. But last year we had an $80,000 legal fee budget, and we booked $183,000 worth of legal bills. Some of it you just can't get away from. But it's the not knowing part that is, in my opinion, needs better management. And we should be able to sit down with the law firm and say, okay, what are you working on? What kind of time do you have into this? What can we do to mitigate the amount of time you're putting into this? What can we do better on our end? Legal bills can be a runaway train. I worked in New York City for 25 years, and I dealt with some very high-powered law firms, and some that charge $1,200 an hour, and if you let them run the clock, they will.
They will, and let me I think it's now time for me to kind of take a lead with that in regards about the legal cost. We're talking around $183,000. At least, I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but almost near $90,000 to $100,000 for special ed.
Yeah.
Let's just tag it for what it is. We don't need I don't want the general public to think, gosh, why is Dr. Compton and the Board of Ed having $183,000 legal bills? When you look back in the past, your legal bills have run very close under $200,000. So let's also tell it for what it is. The problem here of what we're dealing with, we have minimized the amount of times of calling the attorney, very much so. And I want you to go back and see those logs. As you know, I've shared and scanned them, because I think it's very important that you see exactly what was the log, what was it about. As Mr. Bucci has done a great job in summing this up, it really depends a lot, or it will be collective bargaining for the next few months, because in representing the 5 different groups with negotiations. The biggest problem, the biggest expense, 1 month, I guess it was March, April, we had a $9,000 legal fee for special ed. This hasn't occurred just once, this has occurred numerous times. When you're in litigation, yes, you've got to make sure that you're represented. We're going to move forward with the plan and making sure, now that we're going with the same law firm, and not the other firm. It doesn't make any difference which firm, but specifically that absolutely the necessity of why we have to call the attorneys. So we're going to try to streamline that. As you all know, special ed, the numbers have increased. You always have ongoing litigation. You always have advocates, and you have to have representation. But we have to get a handle on this. This is July now, and we're not going to continue to have these type of legal fees. Sometimes they're $4,000 a month, sometimes they're $5,000. Some districts have put into place, they don't call the attorney till they go through the superintendent or the regular board attorney before they call the special ed attorney. And that was part of the reason why that you all decided to go with one law firm, was to make sure too, and trying to keep that umbrella. So we're going to work, we're going to make sure that we hold the line in every way that we can. I think with having it under one firm, but it does have to be separated, as Mr. Busey says. We have to show specifically what are straight Board of Ed legal costs and what are not. And nobody just picks up the phone and calls the lawyer. It's supposed to be really technically your board chair, leadership team, a designated whatever, or the superintendent. So I'm going to be working very closely with administration, and it's something I stepped in and inherited last fall, but it's time we do a different way of doing business.
Sal, if I can.
Yeah, please.
Sal, where do we put, what account is it under, 330?
330.
Is there anything else in that?
In 330?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So 330, I'm glad you asked that question, because 330 is a slush fund,
Yeah.
okay? And I've broken this apart. So what you have had in 330, for instance, para educators, there's about $100,000 worth of costs relating to Delta T because of the shortage of para educators buried in 330. There are legal fees in 330. There are office services like InfoShred and ADP where we process our payroll. There are costs in there relating to educational items like ACEs. There are some ACEs items and Connecticut behavioral health and music therapy and whatnot. I was on the phone with Linda Bellavance last week, and what we've done is we have taken all the non-educational ACEs and other assessments and things like that that have been buried in 330, and Linda's been given two specific accounts in account 320 that she can charge to. One is for ACEs, which typically runs about $225,000, $230,000 a year, and she has a $230,000 budget. And the other is everything else that she was burying in 330. The second thing we've done with 330 is we've created separate accounts for legal fees relating to special ed and another account for legal fees relating to non-special ed, if you want to call it, okay? So that we can track the items that are in that account separately without having to go through and do this kind of analysis where I have to put every transaction sitting in this account on a page, and it's a ridiculous amount of time. So the answer to your question is 330 has just been sort of a dumping ground where no one knows what else to do with something, and they've been putting it in 330, and it's finally under control right now.
Does it make sense to bullet legal fees out?
I think so as
And-
well. Yeah,
Well,
I mean, he can do that.
We can, I mean, the answer is, I can tell you now, I can move it to another line if you want me to add another line on the report, you know, and just create another caption. But the way it's been currently structured, I can pretty much now look at this accounting system and I can tell you with certainty, within 330, what the breakdown is without having to go through this machination of trying to separate everything out. But I'm happy to expand the reporting. What I was trying not to do was to turn this into, you know, a lot of different line items. But legal fees is a significant item, and it's going to be significant this year with all the collective bargaining. So, you know, it is clearly something that's going to continue, as Dr. Compton said, going forward, because, you know, when you have some of these hearings, if you will,
Yeah.
like occur,
Due process.
you have to have representation. And you can't
In all due
predict how many of
fairness.
these you're going to have.
And then legally you have to be protected, and, you know, that's the part which is totally that we have to pay for. It's just, we've just got to streamline some other areas. But they
But, I mean,
definitely need to be separated.
I can make,
Thank you.
I could make another account for you if you want. I could make it 340, and they could stick it in that same category there, and we could put legal fees in there, and it's the beginning of the
Well,
year.
I mean, I don't know about the other two here, but it's always been something that we wanted to keep an eye on. So if we know what did you say, 180 was what we budgeted for?
80.
80,
10,000.
well, this year was 80, and we spent 180. Next year, I've budgeted close to upwards of between 150, 200,000, because I knew we had collective bargaining going on. And we have 5. We have nurses, paras, custodians, secretaries, and we have administrators that has just begun now also. And those 5 collective bargaining, and if you look at the calendar for all the meetings that are occurring relating to these collective bargaining, it's quite a few meetings. And the attorney attends every one of these. So, you know, to me, it's just not conceivable that we're not going to spend, you know, at least 150 and north of 150 on legal bills.
At the most, and
Yeah,
that's trying to hold it
I don't see
down.
any harm in including those line items or more itemized for a professional services account. I think that's a good idea. So even though you've got it set up, it would be great to have them show.
I mean, if you want, like I said, I can expand this report, or I can report on it. Whatever you would prefer.
Just expand it, you think? And leave the
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think it should be shown on the report.
Okay,
I
very
think
good.
that you,
You'd like a
given the
separate?
fact that you've drawn attention to it and that it's an area that you have kind
Absolutely.
of concern.
Very easy to do.
It
Great.
sounds like it's something we should, that it's a good
Yeah.
measure.
And
of what you just talked about.
It's very easy to do.
And I appreciate the support as well, because I think you need to know specifically
Right.
the cost of legal expenses.
And so with regard, do we have systems in place where we will not accept invoices that come in 3 months late? Because, I mean, I know in my life, if you don't get your expense report in at least 2 weeks before the end of the year closes, you're out of luck.
Well, you know, again, it's like any other bad habit. I think, look, the attorneys we're dealing with at Bircham are quite professional. If I went to them and I said, look, guys, this doesn't work for us getting a bill 90 days late.
Right.
Okay, close out your whips, they call them whips, work in process. Close out your whips, send us a bill by the 3rd week of the following month, or something like that. I mean, if you're at least only 1 month behind, I'm okay with that.
Absolutely.
But,
Yeah.
you know, when they get a bill in March, when they get a bill in July for March,
Yeah.
because they know we're closing the year, and now all of a sudden they're rushing to get their bills in, well, that doesn't help any.
Right. Doesn't help us at all.
And so, you know, I do think just better communication,
Okay.
and I'm happy to keep on that end of it as it relates to getting the bills and making sure we record them,
And true transparency, that's why I
It's not-
think
yeah.
it's wonderful when I scan you the legal fees, both from the board expenses and then the special ed.
Wonderful subjective.
Well, I think you just need to see it.
Any-
It's being very upfront.
Dr. Chris, any other questions for,
a couple more, I just,
I'm just aware of time, that's all.
Pardon?
I'm just cognizant of time at 7:28.
yeah, okay. As it relates to the report for June, okay, in May, I came here requesting that we were going to be $575,000 over budget. And that was the estimate we did at the time. We've come in at a final number now at 629. And so since then, it's increased about 54,000. 23 of it, as I mentioned, it was legal bills, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that makes up the difference. Here's what I did not do. We did not do what they have apparently done in the past, which is, well, let's just hone in on a number and then stick everything in the following year. We have enough budget challenges for fiscal 22, 23. 21, 22 is what it is. We gave you an accurate financial report. We've looked at all the grants to make sure that we're maximizing the grants and utilizing them for what they were intended for. I don't see where we're going to be able to materially pick up. I would love to have come in here and just said, gee, I'm a sage. I picked the number 2 months ago, and that's still the number. the reality is, there was just a lot of stuff we processed this month, and I took the approach that, let's record it in the proper period, let's go into fiscal '23, let's start off on the right foot, and let's have accurate financial reporting every month, and let's not come in here explaining every month budget overruns that have absolutely nothing to do with our current operations,
So how
okay?
was that received by the town?
Pardon?
How was that received by the town?
I have to submit that to them after you sign off on another one of these requests, but I had already had a preliminary conversation with Doug last Friday, because he said there's a town meeting that they need to go to get this approved. He asked me if I was ready. I said I need to present to my board Monday night, and that I'll be submitting another request, but as it stands at the moment, we are over what we submitted last time. Also, you should know that the Board of Finance did defer on considering our last request actually until August, because Bill Sawicki knew that more likely than not, that wasn't going to be the final number. So he's been very
Very supportive.
supportive, and he understands what we're dealing with as it relates to last year. And look, the reality is, I'm giving them every assurance that going forward, this is not how we're operating, okay? We have a 5.3% budget increase. 3.4 relates to this coming year. 1.9 of it relates to what we talked about the past.
Right.
Of that 3.4, 2.8 is teacher salary increases.
Yeah.
We've gone through the rest of the budget, and we're
So
comfortable we can.
Totally here, I think all of us are absolutely tracking on that. Do we have language for the motion you need for us to make this evening? 'Cause I don't think it's on the agenda.
There's inside this report, there's the, what do you call it, is in here.
There's a recommendation.
It's in the second narrative. There were two narratives. The first narrative was the one pager that was on top. If you scroll down to, I don't know, page 11 or something, you'll find that there's a second narrative that is the updated June report. After that two-page report, there is the updated transfer request, which I would ask that
I
you
see it.
Yeah.
make a motion to add to your agenda items when the board convenes, so that we can consider this and submit this. Other than that, this report didn't change materially from the last time for June. It is the, what I consider to be the pre-audit final report. I don't expect any substantial adjustments to come out of the audit. And in fact, we're pretty much ready to go with the audit. Now, they'll come out and plan in August, but they won't start until October.
And I would just like to say, just to wrap up, Mr. Bucci and I are going to attend 4 quarterly town finance committee meetings that Bill Sawicki has requested. And we think that's a good situation to just go and.
So can we get, Leanne, could I ask if you could send calendar invites to the
Yeah,
three
so
of us
you
as
all
well
could
for
be
that?
there as well.
Yeah, exactly, thank you.
Yeah, it's,
4 times.
Dr. Compton and I were talking about this earlier today. I really appreciate the gesture that Mr. Sawicki is making, because he's really trying to foster better lines of communication, the ability to discuss things. Now, the one thing that I did caution about was, we have our meetings on the first Monday of the month. They have their meetings on the last Tuesday of the month. I'm not discussing at their meetings anything that I have not discussed with the Board of Education first, which means that I can come and bring the report that I delivered to you maybe 3 weeks earlier or 2 weeks earlier, but as it relates to items that have not been publicly discussed in this forum, then they'll defer those until the following month, and I think that's a fair way to go.
Well, that's how we have to do.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
but I do think it's a good start to developing better rapport with the town.
Did you have a question?
I just had a comment. I think this, holding the final reconciliation of FY '22 until, the close of July makes sense, so that we're properly accounting for the expenses in an appropriate year. My only suggestion would be that we institute, along with all the other great things you're doing, is some kind of formal process for this to happen in August at these board meetings, or else it's going to get lost in the sauce, right? This transfer request is buried in the financial management report. Perhaps just more of a standing, August agenda item that we do the year-end closeout at our August your point, we had always done it that way previously, let's make the improvement that every August we'll do the year-end closeout. That would just be my suggestion, so we
Well,
kind of formalize the
I'm going to
process.
say that I hope that in the future, we are not submitting any more transfer requests.
But
Um,
even just a year-end closeout
but,
report.
yeah,
you know,
there's no
whether
way you
it
can close
results
out
in a
the first
transfer or
week of
not,
July.
The idea that we have a kind of
Yeah.
formal closeout of the fiscal year, I think is prudent, given our financial challenges we've seen over year. So
And that
that's-
we don't make
Right,
any
that's just my
mistakes again.
Right.
And like you just mentioned, I mean, the accountability and the monitoring, we are looking at everything. With budgets from the schools, everything from overtime in the schools, district as a whole, also, all areas.
Yeah, the thing you should also understand is when we deliver these reports the first Monday of the month, oftentimes, they're not really through the 31st or the 30th of the prior month because there's just not enough time. You have to do a cutoff, maybe it's the 25th, and then deliver the best you can, on, say, Monday, the 2nd or the 3rd or whatever it is. But when it comes to year end, absolutely, there's no reason to be jumping the gun in the first week of July on a year
Right.
that is still warm. You need a month to really get your head wrapped around all of the stuff that's flowing in, and Kathy, who handles accounts payable and a number of other things, was in and out of my office all month long with all kinds of things that came in, and how do I deal with this?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's standard, like, business at the end of a closing of a calendar year, so we totally get it. So I would entertain a motion to recommend to the full board that they approve the transfer request from the town fund balance to the Board of Education, the amount of $629,000, negating the previous transfer request that the board approved in June.
Second.
You're the first, actually.
I'll second.
You're so moved.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
And then also I move to recommend to the full board the approval of August financial management summary.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I do not have any report to give. Dr. Compton, do you have anything to
No,
add?
I'm fine.
Okay, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The Finance Committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Of Ed meeting to order at 7:39. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'd like to just have everybody remain standing, and we're going to have a moment of silence for one of our former Board of Ed members, Theodora Claridis, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hatfield. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of you had the opportunity to work with Mrs. Theodora Claridis, or Babe, as she would introduce herself. Babe was elected to the Board of Education in November of 2013. During that election, her first run for public office, she had one of the highest vote tallies across the ballot. Babe probably made history as one of the oldest elected first-time members of this board, being 81 years old when she took office. She was extremely humbled by the opportunity to be sworn into office by her older daughter, Themis, along with her younger daughter, Nicole, being sworn in that same night while serving on the Board of Selectmen. Babe was a Wildcat fan. Her husband of 63 years, Peter, bled blue and gold. She could be seen in the stands next to him cheering on their beloved grandson, Kay, during football games, and believed that Wildcat pride was very important. She believed in the town of Seymour and was proud of her family's accomplishments. Babe also believed in education. Many times before we would carpool to a meeting, I would find her reading the agenda on her iPad while preparing an index card of questions she might want to ask during a meeting. She wanted to be sure that everyone had as many opportunities as possible to take advantage of, like those that she was both that Seymour had provided her daughters with. She was impressed with the appearance of our schools, and that was something. Because if you knew Babe, she would always be the best dressed in the room for any board or committee meeting that she attended. Babe may have been from West Haven, but became a Wildcat. It was an honor to be her colleague on this board, but it was even more of an honor for me to call her my friend. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about my friend Theodora Babe Claridis this evening.
Thanks, Jay. All right, next up on the agenda is public comment. Actually, before we do that, just going to do a round table, just introduce ourselves. I guess I'll start today. Chris Champagne, Board Chair. Go around to the right.
Oh, to the right. Jay Hatfield, Board Vice Chair.
Bethany Gary, board member. Kristen Bruno, board member. Shannon Levy, board member.
Stefan Bahuniak, board member.
Salvatore Bucci, Business Manager.
Dr. Susan Compton, Superintendent. Leanne Darty, Board Clerk.
Kristen Harling, board member.
James Garofalo, board member. Ed Stromello, board secretary.
All right, thanks. So, yeah, next up, public comment. Just a reminder, it's not a dialogue between the board and the public. We just ask to keep those comments no longer than 3 minutes. And everybody who would like to make a comment, please state their name and address. So with that, does anybody have public comment?
Hi, good evening. My name is Armin Beljan. I live at 85 Grand Street, and I'm here advocating on behalf of my brother on the issue of lowering the grade standard to participate in extracurricular activities from 65 to a 60, or raising the passing rate from a 60 to a 65 in Seymour schools. So, my brother, he's an athlete. He's also a student, but he is not as academically inclined as many other people. And what really motivates him is the ability to get on the field and play. And what will not help him is being able to take him off that field, thinking that it's going to help motivate him more in school, because extracurricular activities are the ultimate motivator for students. And it is impossible in this situation for, say, my brother, to get a second chance when he knows he has done wrong. Because the grade standard being a 60 to pass and a 65 to be eligible for extracurricular activities means that he is falling in between that gray area where he cannot recover that credit because he already has said credit, and he does not have the ability to become eligible for extracurriculars again. And as I said before, extracurriculars are the ultimate motivator for students, because a student finding the ability to play on a team, to play an individual sport, makes them want to work harder in school. It makes them more motivated. It makes them want to work harder. But taking the ability away from said student to be able to have something to strive for, to be better at something, to be able to participate in a sport, that ultimately hurts them, because now I know my brother personally, I've known him all my life, and he is going to lose motivation. He will not want to do well in school unless he has something to work for. He is not, I'm looking for the term here. He's not more academically inclined, as I said before. He's more focused on sports and stuff like that, but he still needs to do well in school. I'm not saying that this exception needs to be made because he's a great athlete. It needs to be made because he needs to be a great student. And the only way he can be a great student is that if he has said motivation. Now, during the last years, we all know it's been trying times. You know, COVID, I know we're all sick of hearing it, but it still has its impacts today. My brother, again, was not the greatest student, but COVID absolutely ruined it. It was hard for him to adapt, and when he just adapted, we went back in school, which was hard for him to adapt again. For me, myself, as I just graduated Seymour High School, I know that it was tough. It was difficult for me to adapt from being in school all my life to going to online, then going to hybrid. My grades suffered. I'd like to consider myself a good student. I'd like to consider myself somebody who is good academically and keeping my extracurriculars in check. But I still suffered. It was difficult for me to keep my grades at where I wanted them to be. My standards slipped. I wasn't able to keep up. And I feel like the standards that we are still holding ourselves to, they don't help the student, they ultimately harm them. About, say, 5 or 6 years ago, I was actually in this room with Ms. Hammond and Mr. DeStacey when we were writing the handbook for the 2018 to 2019 year for the middle school. And I was one of the main petitioners to get that standard to a 65 to be able to participate in sports and extracurriculars. Now, at the time, that was a good move. But with current events, what has happened recently, where there is a more mental toll on the student, where it's harder for a student to be able to participate in a class, just a class maybe online, maybe hybrid. We can't hold ourselves to the same standards as we did 3-4 years ago. Things have changed most certainly, and they have not changed for the better. There needs to be a compassionate understanding for what is good for the student. To be able to have students like my brother to be so motivated in school, it allows them to strive and be better. And ultimately, that's all I'm asking the board for. A chance for my brother to better himself as a student with the motivation of sports. Because again, as I know him, as a person, if he lacks the motivation, he will not do it. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment?
If I may, Fred Stanek, 22 North Benham Road, here in Seymour. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, members of the staff. I'm here this evening for 3 reasons. First, I would like to concur with Mr. Hatfield's comments and remarks regarding Mrs. Claris, just a wonderful, wonderful lady. Also to mention that she and her husband were very generous to the school district over many years. As I want to mention that the 2 banners hanging in the gymnasium honoring the 1982 and 1983 mock trial team, and the team won the state championship at the state Supreme Court 2 years in a row. Those banners are donated by the Claris family and their daughter, Emma, was a member of that team. I'm also here this evening with regard to the item 7B, debate club coach Seymour Middle School. I recall at a prior meeting when this issue was raised that Mr. Kaplan was interested in the position after his retirement, that some members mentioned that it may not be proper under the contract, that it's not precedence. There is precedence. After my wife Karen served as the mock trial team coach for over 20 years, and she gave up the position, an outside attorney was hired as the advisor, so there's precedence. And I would like to speak in favor of Mr. Kaplan. He's my friend since kindergarten, first grade. He's a great guy. He's an unsung hero of the school district. He does so much for the district. And I think he should continue as a debate club coach. He was one of the founding teachers who founded the club, the advisorship, 6 years ago, and he deserves to continue since he wants to continue. Finally, I'd like to thank the school district for selecting me as the 2022 distinguished alumnus. It was quite the honor. Thank you.
Mr. Jack. Anybody else for public comment?
Paul Spanheim, 25 Falcon Drive, it's more of a question than a comment. The 65 rule, does that pertain to all extracurricular activities? Yes, so the band, whatever it is. Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Public comment going twice. Last call, public comment. Hearing none, we will move on to item 4, the reports. Committee meeting minutes. We have the finance and facilities. Would either Ms. Harmeling or Ms. Steriak like to say anything?
I would just say that on the finance committee report, the finance report, if you have not read it, I definitely recommend reading this month. It actually has more to do with some policies and procedures that Mr. Bucci and our superintendent have put into place than it does actual financials, because as you guys know, we're in July, so there's not much to report on there. And then, as was, I think, mentioned right before our meeting started, there will be a transfer request that I'll be asking to add to the agenda this evening. It's just a different amount than the transfer request that we talked about in June. So that'll be coming up, but it's definitely worth a read to understand the policies that are being put in place to have tighter control over our finances. Beth, anything?
Regarding the Facilities and Transportation Committee meeting, we met in July 11th, and we talked about 2 topics, one of which was the HVAC RFP, which was scheduled to be advertised no later than July 15th, and I believe it was. And then the other item was an overview of a 5-year capital budget for our facility needs, working with Mr. Connors on that, and the board had, or the committee had quite a few comments about the need for it, so we're looking forward to securing that report when it's done, or started, I should say.
Any questions for Chris and Beth? All right, moving on. Item 5, consent agenda. We have some minutes, management reports, and transfer requests.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Ms. Harmeling.
I'd like to remove C, please, from the consent agenda.
Okay.
I don't know what, revise, rescind.
No, it never went through.
Okay. We'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A1 and B.
All right, motion by Ms. Harmeling. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Deriak. Any questions, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 8-0-1. Item 6, items removed from the consent agenda, intra-district transfer request. Mr. Strinella.
Just a question for Dr. Compton concerning those, and, I'm going to, obviously not use student names for confidentiality purposes, but I'm just questioning whether one of the requests was not for a babysitting issue that usually is the request, was a picking of the one elementary school over the other elementary school, and I'm concerned that we may start a bad precedent where we're going to have more parents come and saying that even though they live on this side of town, they want the elementary school on that side of town, and vice versa. And I think that's a slippery slope for us to proceed on, especially where we have disparity in the population of both of the schools now. I'm even hearing talk that there's people that maybe request us to look at different division lines to try to equalize the elementary schools more so. So there's a lot of that kind of talk there. So I'm just, and we usually always rely on the superintendent to say that it doesn't impact class sizes, because obviously if we have 4 or 5 kids at one grade level wanting to go to another school, then that changes the whole dynamics of equalization of class sizes on both sides of town. So that's just my question why I removed that. So if you could respond to
Yeah.
that multitude of questions.
Right, yes, that's absolutely correct, Mr. Chamello, about if there's so many kids from the same grade that move in regards about increasing the cap size. Our biggest issue right now is with Chatfield or Presti. The enrollment has increased more than any of the other 4 schools. The enrollment is technically up to about 560, and it's growing, and Bungie is not. And that's the issue. Bungie is not growing like Chatfield or Presti. Some of these requests were just basically either just because of the location kind of close by. I do think it's something that the Board of Ed is going to definitely have to address in the future, because if Chatfield or Presti keeps growing and Bungie's not, I think a lot of that has to do with the real estate situation where so many homes sold in the Chatfield or Presti area. A lot of people moved in, and just a big increase in enrollment. So that's a concern. It does with movement right now, for example, we've got to be very careful with numbers. Bungie right now, 4th grades are getting pretty filled. So a lot of it depends upon the specific grade level. But you're exactly right. But I think as a board, you're going to have to help me and give direction. I used to hear there used to be certain streets that some both could go to both places. So I don't know that exact history, but it's something we got to really look at, because Chatfield is growing leaps and bounds and Bungie's just not expanding that much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jim.
I have a 2-point question for you,
Yeah.
Dr. Compton. At what point would you, as the superintendent, be ready to make a recommendation to this board as to a particular action it should consider when we are looking at the type of situation you've just described? I would imagine, if I may just speak out loud, I would imagine that that would come down to the number of staff, the grade distribution,
Right.
and how we could best serve the community with a particular recommendation of yours, were the school to be faced with an overwhelming, disproportionate and disparate student body.
Right.
Because the board, as I see it, would always ask the superintendent, what's your recommendation? You're on the ground day after day, and we live in an ivory tower, so we have to consider what you say and take that into consideration. So, to go back to my original question, what recommendations would you make, given what I've just said?
What I think we should do, I think we should take this entire year and do a study, do a demographic study, look at the data, look at the exact grade levels, look at the amount of staff in both schools, and look at the streets, and look specifically at what it's showing us with the growth. And I think definitely then I would like to come back with a recommendation, because if Chatfield keeps increasing and Bungie's not, then we have to address the issue. And I would have a recommendation of possibly looking at certain streets and that could become Bungie's area. That's what I would like to have the rest of the year to study and bring you back this data. I mean, actually in the winter.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just to continue the thread.
Sure, we might be
I
getting a
don't mean
little
to
off
interrupt.
topic,
I know,
though.
yes,
We might be getting, I mean,
yes.
if, I just to point out
Yeah.
the waivers, we do have a policy, it's 5117.1,
Right.
we could look that over, but sure, go ahead.
Well, for example, if Bungie were to find itself with sufficient staff but fewer students, would we consider a transfer of staff from Bungie to Chatfield or Presti? Would those transfers be
We'd work with-
involuntary and so forth?
We'd
I'm
have to
really
work with the
looking at
union
a
contract.
large picture here.
Yes,
And I can appreciate the fact that we do have an increase. And how do we do that to be fair
and equitable.
to all the children? I'm not so much concerned other than that. How are we going to do right by the children?
And that'd be my main priority as well, but I think it's something we need to look at this year. I need to come back and give you the data, exactly how many kids have moved in. An excellent, and I'll just share this real quick and be quiet, but kindergarten, for example, the numbers in kindergarten are much higher for Chatfield or Cresty than Bunkie.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so I want to thank Mr. Stramello for pulling that out of the consent agenda because I did not look closely enough at them because we're just so used to seeing them. So I appreciate that you called it out, and I think we should separate these and make a motion on the first one and a motion on the second one because I share the same concerns with Mr. Stramello that they're almost always when we grant inter-district requests, it's because it's a student's last year in school and their parents move somewhere else in town, or because it's a babysitting issue, or, this one is not that, and I agree that it sets a really poor precedent.
Well, there've been some that have been done that way in
I
the
was just
past.
going to ask, in the
That's
last month,
why I placed it there, because I went back and did my history and I studied, and there were some that were granted.
in
Yeah.
last
So
month,
you're saying
because there
we
was
missed
a,
that last month? We missed it last month?
I'm thinking so. I mean, I didn't look through every single one of them, but there was a lot last month.
It's something that the board has given, the superintendent, just in looking at, if they put in and ask for an intertransfer, I mean, it's been granted, but specifically when you want to look each of them, then that's fine. It's just, I'm just being very upfront about them and showing you everything, as I should.
So, I agree with separating them. I think it's challenging when the board's given a transfer and it doesn't meet the criteria of the policy we have in place. So I hear that there's been past precedent. I'm also disappointed that it gets to this level and if it doesn't meet the policy, it shouldn't even be in front of us.
I think it does meet the policy. The policy is super vague.
The policy says, among factors not generally considered are specific school preference for personal reasons. And I think that from my perspective, that second, or that, whatever we want to call it, one of two, doesn't meet the factors that we have as guidance under 5111.
Thank you.
So,
And this way they can know early on that, they wouldn't be going, that they would be staying at that same exact school.
Well, we do have the policy. I think we're split a little bit here. So really there's two options, for motion. Do we have a motion to approve the item removed, or is there a pleasure of the
Could
board?
I just explore the policy just a little bit more?
Sure.
I'm not seeing how, I'm seeing a lot of reasons not to approve a waiver, but I'm not seeing like the reasons we should. Are we looking at the same policy map at 5117.1?
That's the other confusing part, is there's 5111, and then there's
There's a second one.
5111.7.
Yes.
So I was reviewing both of them. That's what I read. I didn't know how to interpret them.
So
to be honest.
on the,
It may be cleaner just to deny it.
on the form, it talks about whether or not you've read policy 5117.1.
Which is attached, right?
Yeah.
Which is attached. It speaks to the responsibility, really, of the parent or guardian. It does state on the bottom, to Beth's point, some of the items that sort of fall out of that policy.
On the form itself.
On the policy.
On the
Not
policy.
the form.
It's cleaner just to pull it.
I will make a motion to deny the intra-transfer request that appears first in our packet.
So we have a motion by Ms. Harmeling,
I'll second it.
second by Mrs. Stariak. Any further discussion? My only worry with this, guys, is not knowing word for word what we did last month.
I just looked through last month's. There's at least one in there that I think is similar to this one, so I will not vote no on this, or vote yes on this motion. I think that's worth precedent for us to do that back-to-back months.
Yeah, these are for 1 year, so.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I ask you to repeat, because you confused me what you said?
The motion
You
is
said
to
yes,
deny.
then you
No,
said no.
sorry, because the motion is to deny the first one, so I will not support the denial personally, because last month, to me, it looks like we are being hypocritical based on what we approved last month, without any scrutiny, which is, on all of us for not looking at it closer.
Anyone else? All right, Karen.
I was just going to ask, we have a big agenda. I wish I had 5 minutes to look and see last month's. I don't know how to operationalize that. Stefan, could I ask you, could you quickly put the link to that in an email? I just feel like I'm not going to be able to find it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I just pulled it from last month's agenda. It was super easy, but, yeah, I could share that somehow.
Thank you.
Would you like a 5-minute recess?
I would love one, but I don't want to be kind of
Started.
We kind of started it.
You need a motion for a recess? I'd like to make a motion for 5-minute recess.
Motion by Ed,
Second.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Thank you.
We'll be back in 5 at 8:12. motion on the table to deny 102. Anything else we'd like? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion fails 2-7.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the second intra-district transfer request for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
She beat to it. Motion by Ms. Harling, second by Stefan. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Carries 9-0.
I make a motion to approve the first interdepartment transfer request.
Motion by Mr. Boniak. Do we have a second? Second, Mrs. Bruno. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh,
I'll just comment, thank you for the recess. I think it gave us a chance to review past precedent regarding the situation. However, I think moving forward, we need to look at the policy and the process by which these come before us.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think we've made some ill-informed decisions in the past perhaps, and I think we should be sharper going forward.
yeah, I think this will be one of the things we bring up with policy committee.
1,056 numbers of things we have to do with the policy.
You're on that with me, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, and I think you are too. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 8-1.
There's quite a history of this, if you'll go back to
Yeah.
board meetings, even on past me.
I'm sure there is. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's a history.
Lived it also, right, Mrs. Bruno?
All right, moving on. Item 7, discussion possible action. A, we have a position change for next year only to reduce full-time high school social worker to a .6.
I'll make a motion to reduce the full-time Seymour High School social worker to a .6 social worker for the 2020-2023 school year as presented by the principal and the superintendent.
This is
High school
based,
principal.
this is based upon her request.
I have a
To a
motion
family
by
situation.
Ed.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Bohuniak. Any discussion?
Is there any background that can be provided regarding the request, or not the request necessarily, but the administration's view on it? I guess I was surprised by this being on the agenda.
This is something that this person has been discussing for several months. I can't get into personnel. I can just tell you that based upon our team at the high school and talking with Mr. Floyd and this person, it's a request based upon family consideration with children of different ages. This person's very dedicated, as you all know. You've been very supportive of this person. She's done an outstanding job. But for this coming year, she definitely would like to go back for us, just be considered 3 days a week. We think we have this covered with a good team, with 4 counselors, another full-time counselor, and a full-time school psychologist. I know with resources and where we're at, I would just like, to grant this based upon her need. Mr. Floyd, would you like to say a few words about this? And that's just.
Talking about this, but it was a request for the faculty member.
Yeah, we don't want personnel, but just it's a request.
That's why I didn't make a motion.
Her name is on the agenda.
I know, but I
Yeah.
didn't make a motion.
Okay, that's good, Mr. Floyd. I think they don't want to continue to talk about, it's personnel. It's just a request, just based upon, she'd like to be reduced.
Have we ever, and I don't know, you might be able to answer this better than any of us, have we ever had a request to reduce something like this from staff?
I could speak to this problem.
Go ahead.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
To answer the question, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. This is I'm very understandable request from a full-time employee to go part-time. It happens all the time. There's nothing more than, I mean, the answer is yes. My problem is acting like we're okay without .4 social worker. That just does not like fit with anything. So I'm gonna vote yes for this because that is what an employer does for their employees. But to just act like, oh, we'll be fine. We're not fine. We're not fine. She has a caseload. Every counselor in our high school has a caseload that's too big. None of them have enough time. So we've got to replace the .4. We've got to.
We can post a .4, it's whether there'll be some, we can post it, whether we will have applicants that will do 2 days a week, I'm not sure of.
Yep, ACES could probably fill, somebody could fill. I just don't, we've hit so hard and in such consensus on the need for social emotional support for our students that this just feels extremely counter without having a plan to put in a .4.
Well, technically, we can contract out if there is a need. If there is a need, definitely based upon the caseload. This is something that we've looked at very carefully. And we could post for that .4 position. There may be somebody that might be willing to come that's doing a private practice that might do 2 days a week. I just don't know.
I was just going to follow up with the chair.
But we do have a good team. We have more people at the high school, secondary level. We don't have a social worker in the elementary schools. We have a social worker at the middle school, and we've had 2 at the high school.
If we were to go that road, the .4 though, is there anything that we as a board need to do to move that process along? Is that creating a one-year position or anything of that matter?
You would have to request from me and create a position of a .4. Financially, resource-wise, I thought we had a good plan in place. Sometimes you have to trust your superintendent, your principal. We think we can cover, but, based upon the importance, I know, social and emotional learning, the needs of our kids. But I think we've got a good team out there, but you would just need to say you would like to request to go ahead. And the position already exists. It's a .6, and now what you would need to do is to say we would like to move forward and do a posting for a .4.
I just want to say, there's no question that I absolutely trust, but we mentioned a lot about boots on the ground and knowing
Yes.
what's really happening. Boots on the ground, right here. Right here. We cannot afford to lose .4.
Well, what's curious for me is that the administration puts forward this request for us to vote, but yet does not say anything with respect to what effect that would have with that .4 reduction. So, am I led to conclude that the caseload is not such that the loss of a .4 makes a significant difference, or we'll get by? I don't know. There's nothing that came forward with this other than that.
Well, let me just explain, Mr. Garpalo. She's a very dedicated staff person of 3 days. There's 4 school counselors. There's a full-time psychologist. I think they felt like that it could be addressed and covered. That was the reason why that we put this request forward. We thought for a year that we could. The best thing we can do is just post a .4.
So we have, go ahead.
Is it a possibility, and I truly understand the dedication of the staff at the high school and the work that went into considering this by the administration, but I also know, and I've said before the Board of Finance, this is not the year to cut anything when it comes to social, emotional, or mental health. So I'm wondering if a district perspective of how that .4 could be used, because maybe something preventative, and it's not my role to, it's the role of the administration to determine this, but look at something at the other levels. Is there support for families? Is there support for students elsewhere in the district for 1 year that .4 might be helpful?
I'm just looking too, from a resource perspective, I look at every budget, every cost, every person. And just based upon this request, I thought due to the issues of why, that we could make it work. But I know that it's very important to you, I understand that, it's important to us. But, you know, the only thing I know is to post a point forward that's your preference.
So we have two issues going on here.
Yes.
We do have a motion for this full-time to .6, so let's act on that, and then if anybody, Mr. Freund?
Board Chair,
Sure. Go ahead.
when when our school psychologist retired, I sat down with Dr. Boyle and we reconfigured the school psychologist position to carry a caseload much larger than the previous one. We're expecting the school psychologist to carry a caseload of 25 to 30 students. That would more than cover the .4 reduction with the social worker. We actually planned for that.
All right. Anything else?
Follow-up question?
Sure.
Could I, through the chair to Mr.
Sure.
Foyne? Mr. Foyne, what duties will the new school psychologist not do that the previous one was? And so how will that workload get picked up?
One of the aspects of what the school psychologist's responsibility was to go through all of the IEPs for the program in great detail. The state, in its infinite wisdom, has come out with a new software program that the individual case managers for the students will be doing the final check. And then it's just a quick review by the school psychologist versus a complete rundown and revision.
And who are case managers?
The individual special ed teachers carrying a caseload of special ed students.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on this?
And this person too is going to do quite a bit of individual counseling. She's been very well trained where she did her internship, this new school psychologist.
Move the question, please.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We have one absent. Motion carries 8-0. Item 7B, another new position for 22-23 to create a part-time secretary position at the high school.
Make a motion to create a part-time secretary position at Seymour High School for the 2022-2023 school year.
Have a motion by Mr. Hatfield. Do I have a
Second.
second? Second, Mr. Stamello. Any questions or discussions?
I did send a detailed thing with the cost and same thing even with the school psychologist. I mean, with the social worker explanation.
All right. No questions, no comments?
I will make a comment.
Go ahead.
I feel for the need, I really do, but I can't support the added addition of this position.
If I may, to the board chair, that's actually losing a full-time position and replacing it with a part-time position.
I just feel like our budget was based on the loss of that, and so now before we even started the school year, we're putting something back in that we
If,
made a conscious decision to
if
remove.
I may, this is I may be getting this mixed up with the other one, but this is the one that carried the .4 teacher, and that we're,
Yeah, one of the things, we didn't replace the .4 language arts teacher in the schedule. Another thing is with the .6, with the social worker, that cost was, with being just a .6, and we had $27,960 left over. A total cost of a secretary for part-time with the MRF and Social Security, the total amount was $36,019. It was a difference of $8,000 between a .6 social worker and the secretary. We didn't replace a .4 English instructor. So this was kind of like a one-time thing financially. We could try.
I would rather see us hold on to the savings from the reduction from full-time FTE for the social worker and hold that. And if we needed to bring in private counselors 2 days a week to kind of fill some needs, I would rather have that money available to us as we start the school year.
Anything else on 7B?
If we do fill the .4 remainder, are we still able to fund this position?
Yes, I went to Mr. Bucci, and also, like I said, with the .4 English teacher, then that suffice for a pretty close amount. Budgetary, I went down through all of this. I've been very detailed with it.
Nobody else? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 7-1-1. Next up is athletic training with Proactive Sports.
I'll make a motion that we approve a contract with Proactive Sports Medicine, Seymour High School, 2022-2023 school year only.
I have a motion by Ed, and a second by Jay. We don't have a contract yet, we just have
Just a
an
proposal.
agreement.
Right, we have the contract that
So,
they're willing $60 an hour.
Okay, and I would think that our athletic director and our assistant to the athletic director will have, and along with Mr. Flynn, will have direct conversation with the Proactive Sports Medicine trainer to make sure that any glitches that have happened in the past are talked about prior to the beginning of the year, so there will be no glitches. But that's just a comment from me.
okay.
It's not a directive because I can't do that.
Jay?
I just want to be sure before we do sign anything that it continues at the $60 an hour rate. I know in their letter it says that the proposal expired 30 days of its receipt, and it was June 24th, 2022. So I just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
maintain the same rate.
Like an, you can make that, through the chair, you can make that into my motion, to amend the motion state 60, Jay.
I'd like to amend the motion.
All right, so we have an amended motion to ensure that the agreement includes $60 per hour. So I have a motion,
Or is no more than
no more than $60.
not to exceed. Sorry.
Amendment.
The amendment is not to exceed $60 per hour.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions, carries 9-0. So the new motion is Proactive Sports Medicine, $60, no more than $60 an hour. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, abstentions, passes 9-0. Next up, item D, academic eligibility for extracurricular activities. I know Dr. Compton had provided a roster of student
Yeah, Miss-
athletes.
Kathy Fed did this matrix. Thank you, Kathy, for your hard work and your data.
Through the
Chanel?
chair. And can I ask that our principal and our assistant athletic director speak to this academic eligibility? I believe they have a proposal they would like to present.
You good with that?
Well, I suppose, I mean, I understand this question is the academic eligibility that was established, I want to say, 4 or 5 years ago. That actually was proposed by, to the athletic subcommittee. After hearing the last Board of Education meeting, the very next day, actually, the
still have the potential to play that winter sport because the winter sport is not over until after the second report card comes out, and if they become academically eligible, they at least get the second half of the season. The same is true for the spring. A student who is ineligible for second quarter, the spring season doesn't start until middle of March. They would be ineligible until the third quarter came out, and again, if they were at 65 or better, they could continue. Unfortunately, that's not true for the fall, because it goes off of that last quarter, and most of the sports, with the exception of football, are done by that first report card, which gets done around the second week of November. Football sometimes can go a little bit longer if they go into state tournament, but that's what we were looking at. So we don't really want it to go back to the 60, but at the same time, we looked at alternatives to give kids an opportunity to kind of earn that back.
Who would the responsibility of keeping an eye on whether or not, if we did like an academic probation?
If they're on academic probation, the expectation would be that they would participate in tutoring on a daily basis for the entire quarter. They would be subject to bi-weekly academic checks to see whether or not they can participate in contests. If they meet our standards of 65 or higher, after the first 2 weeks, they could participate in games. If they don't, they'll have to sit out on the sidelines. These are some of the things we discussed when discussing an academic probation for athletes.
And they need to be in school. So if they're tardy to school, if they're absent from school, then during that 2-week time period, then it just rolls over for another 2 weeks. They have to be in school, they have to be coming to class on time, they have to be going to their tutoring session. We still want to allow them to participate in practices because from a health standpoint, we wouldn't want to clear them and then have them participate in the game the next day. They need to have, according to CIAC, at least 10 days of practicing. So practicing, as long as they maintain their academic, standards that we're putting in, and then after that 2-week period, the possibility of returning to play. And if the grades fall, then they're back on academic probation.
So if we were to do something like that, who follows up with these? Who's making sure the student's going to tutoring? Who's making sure that they're meeting that 65? Is that on?
The tutoring is the tutors will record whether they're there or not. Our attendance records will tell, whether they're tardy to class, things like that.
The documentation.
Would meeting with the school counselor or the social worker meet that requirement for tutoring? So instead of going to a tutor every day, seeing the counselor one of those periods, would that also be acceptable? Because I think sometimes the reasons kids fall behind may not be just not understanding the academics.
Sometimes they need both.
We just had a quick brainstorm session. Honestly, we didn't really talk to Dr. Compton in great detail about it. So
We just did an overview. I think basically with the tutoring and the school counselor should be involved anyhow with any of these kids.
Good?
I think that's an absolutely awesome point, Mrs. Bruno, because sometimes kids fall behind not because of academics, but because of all the other stuff that goes on, and the tutoring can actually be harmful, not like physically harmful, but it's not motivating at all because it's not about comprehension of the material. I am so excited when I read this, just the idea of a probationary period and the idea of having that 2-week check-in and the idea of being able to earn back the right to play. I love this. What I would say is I would love to propose a motion that we temporarily move the grade requirement for fall sports down to 60 while our administration works out this policy, because nothing is worse than knowing the next guy out is going to get to benefit from a policy like this, and the one guy out is going to suffer because of timing. So that is the motion that I'd like to make, but I want to thank you for putting this brainstorming together because I think it's really great. it's too much, we can't vote on this tonight, right? There's too many unanswered what-if scenarios, like, well, what if the student doesn't have a study hall to go to tutoring? What do we do then? So there's a lot of different things to kind of work through.
I think it'd just be a spelled out probation situation. It doesn't involve that many kids.
I think, again, the superintendent and Board of Education, I think this is something we can clear up and we can do.
Just direct us.
Just to be clear though, these kids are being monitored.
Yeah.
Once they get to that standard, we would still be doing biweekly checks. And as soon as they go out, they're not participating in the next standard.
Yeah.
And it would be for all the kids, but it's those kids who start the season on academic probation. And again,
So can I have a clarifying question for Dr. Compton? Sure. So, Dr. Compton or Mr. Cohen, what are you suggesting that we just institute a probationary period right now? And how does that affect students over the summer months tomorrow?
so
Go ahead.
right now, they would be able to participate. If they meet
If you would.
the CIAC standards, but not our standards, they can participate in practice. They can't participate in contests. The participation in contests would be delayed for 2 weeks into the school year, where then we can do an academic check. At that point, they've achieved the Seymour School's academic standards, and then they can participate in contests. Now, from that point going forward, there'd be a check every other week. If they drop below our standards, they would not be able to participate in the contest after, until the next week. So it really puts the emphasis on the students to perform academically during their sports season. Because honest with you, there's some students who are academically eligible to start the season, midway through the season, they're grade 1.
Right. And they get to continue to play, right? So yeah, I'm trying to formulate the right motion.
I think legally, though, you'd have to alter with some type of probationary.
I think we could possibly do something in which we give the high school administration and the superintendent permission. We approve a academic probation for this year, and then give the authority to Dr. Compton to enact that. I saw, Stefan?
If I may share my thoughts on the whole subject here. I've spent a lot of time in the last month thinking about this, talking to people about it, struggling with it. Where I've arrived, and I'm not sure this is the most popular take at the moment, but I believe that our initial decisions years ago to raise the standards, very well intentioned. You could argue it's a smart move. I think all the discussions now, talking about probation and what makes people eligible, very well intentioned. Good people making good ideas. At the end of the day, though, to me, it comes down to we are a public school district. We have standards for passing classes, earning credits, and graduating. The CIAC has standards for eligibility. To me, having an arbitrary standard on top of those doesn't make sense. So my position is I think we should scrap the extra requirements altogether.
I would totally respect that opinion, and it keeps things simple. It doesn't confuse things in people's minds, and I get that completely. I don't, even though I said I don't know what motion to formulate, the more I think about it, I don't think we need a motion. This is not a board policy. This is a student handbook, an athletic handbook policy, which is in the domain of the school, sort of, unless we say otherwise, right? That's what the handbook says. The handbook says created in conjunction with the Board of Education. So I don't know if this is where you're going, Chris, but if you were thinking if there is a need to make a motion, the motion could simply be to defer to the high school administration as they, I don't know, develop a potential new standard. And I mean, if this is what administration is comfortable with, that would start effectively now. We're in the summer. But it's not a policy. I just wanted to make sure everybody was reminded that this is not a board policy, like policy 112.5.
Thoughts? I mean, I'm trying to remember, this was 4 years ago we did this.
2019, I think,
2019, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
2019.
July and August of 2019.
And through the chair, we're not the only district that has standards that are higher than CIAC. For Mr. Bohuniak's edification, there are other districts that have it, there are districts that have it higher than 65. So, I mean.
But they're all
if-
arbitrary, you would agree, right?
If I could finish, please, first.
Go.
Okay, and if we pride ourselves in having a good district and a high standard district, that was part of the intent behind the 65 versus the minimal of 60. Okay.
Yeah, no, if I may, and I don't disagree with you, of course I want high standards for our students, but the passing standard is still 60. It feels like we're trying to have it both ways. And this isn't a decision I've come to lightly, because I talked with you, Ed, before we even started talking about this. I respect these two a great deal. I respect Mr. DeStacy a great deal. I know that the reasons for this standard are good. They're well-intentioned. I don't doubt that we're not the only district that has these, but at the end of the day, any standard above what the CIC dictates is arbitrary. And to me, that doesn't sit well unless we change other policies as well.
And just to, some districts have 65 as their passing grade, so then at least it's
I would be more in favor of
consistent.
raising our passing grade to 65
Right.
than raising a subset of students having to hit 65 to participate in all of school activities.
All right, we don't have any,
I think Jim.
oh,
Mr.
Frank?
Go ahead.
If we implemented the CIAC standards as they're written, it's 60 or higher in 5 or more classes.
Four.
In
Four.
4 or more classes, all right, so then,
Yep.
would that standard take kids 6 years to graduate from Seymour High School?
Understood?
The other thing is, we do have a 8-period schedule, so it's conceivable for students to be taking 8 classes. So in that passing 5 or higher than 65 are your, a lot of your electives. Physical education, your art classes, so, there's a lot of opportunities, and most of our kids do not take classes, they're taking 6, 7, and some are taking 8.
Jim?
You know, I'm not a lawyer, but if I were to ask Mr. Stanek, all of this seems to me arbitrary and capricious. Somewhere, somehow, somebody decided 60 is too low. We need to raise it. We need to raise standards. You know, maybe my thinking is askew here, but it's kind of like this to me. We're in inflation. Wages are not keeping up with the inflation, so let's raise the taxes. So we have students, children, that have suffered an educational deficit. If anyone says otherwise, I will debate that with them. So now we're looking to impose a higher standard in sports. Why?
In all extracurricular activities, it's not just sports.
And it was established before.
Well, if you're talking about CIAC standards and now you're talking about this district raising the standard above CIAC, or did I miss something?
Through the chair, may I clarify?
Our standards are raised in 2019.
In 2019, we, not you, Mr. Rapallo, because you were opposed to it, but we who are sitting here now, the rest of us who were here in 2019, approved this. We made a motion to approve the recommendation of the athletic committee to require students to pass 5 classes with a 65 or better in order to participate in sports and school-sanctioned clubs. So we did it, who are sitting here, who were sitting here then, except for you. So it's already been done.
Thank you for correcting me.
No, I'm just clarifying
Yeah.
for.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
We've already done it. So the conversation, as I believe it, and I apologize, I wasn't here last month, was that we're going to either change it for 1 year or not. Right? That's really what the issue is on the floor right now.
Well, we don't have any, this is just a discussion. I think
Right.
some of the options last month were, do we go, I think Mrs. Bruno brought up a comment about going 65 to 4. Then there was comments about, lowering to 60, doing it for 1 year. Now we have an academic probation type of thing. So I think there's a lot of options, and there's also just keep the status quo, which, is an option too.
Again, just for clarification purposes, it's already been established
Right.
that we have a threshold,
Correct.
and that threshold is a little bit higher than CIS.
I just want to clarify my position a little bit, and this may be something that loses the only couple of people in the room who might agree with me now, so I might be on a complete island here. I am fully of the belief that those students who are ineligible this year knew the standards and failed to live up to them. I'm not a big believer in changing a policy to help out just a couple. I don't think the policy is unreasonable. I just think it's arbitrary. And so I'm not saying this because I have so much compassion for the individuals who are ineligible, though I do because of all the circumstances, the COVID and all that. I'm just saying that I think it was a mistake, in my opinion, to ever have raised the standards.
I just wanted to say you didn't lose me, Stefan.
Well, I think there might be some others in the room I may lose, unfortunately.
And anybody who articulates their position on this board, that should be respected, so I get it totally.
So do I hear a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to direct, sounds a little off. I'd like to make a motion to ask high school administration to continue to think through a potential probationary period for participation in athletics and extracurricular activities, and leave it to their determination on when to implement changes or not.
We have a motion by Mrs. Harmeling.
Could you repeat that, please?
Oh,
Kristen,
I will
please.
try my best. I'll try to do it more succinctly this time. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I'd like to make a motion to ask the high school administration to continue to pursue various options for academic eligibility for extracurricular participation, period. It's not a resounding motion because it's not in our purview, right? This is not a policy we're asking anyone to change. It's not a policy. They do the student handbook, they come to us when there are questions, and we will collaborate as needed. So it's a purposely ceding control to the people where it resides. And it's largely done because I appreciate their thinking so far.
So we have a motion by Ms. Harmeling.
I'm going to second that
Okay.
for the reason that I think, our role as board members is to create opportunities for students. And just as I will not debate Mr. Garofalo about the educational deficit that kids have experienced. So I think looking at the work that was done by the athletic committee and the board in the past, I think the standards should remain, but I think we have to find ways and be creative to get kids back, to get them connected, and to give them those opportunities to provide the motivation. So that's why I'm in support of looking at the handbook, having the leaders of the athletic and the school programs take a look at what we can put in place to maintain expectations, but to help find a path back for our students.
So we have a motion. I don't even know where we are with this. I won't ask you to read it back. We have a motion by Ms. Harmeling, second by Mrs. Bruno.
Yep, just another comment? Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with your thinking, and as having lived the position as a athletic director at physical education, I commend the administration for their work. So I support it.
I just want to ask, is this motion, I don't know if anybody knows this answer, is this motion going to be sufficient to accomplish the goals of potentially getting students back into their activities this semester? Because if not, then we're wasting our time.
I don't know.
And that's not a
very
shot at
ambiguous.
promotion, but I just don't know what the motion needs to be
It's illegal.
to accomplish our goals.
That's it? Made the motion?
Sure.
Thank you. Basically, I'm putting trust and faith that the conversation that was started with the administration will continue down that path. So I'm putting my faith in that because I don't feel it's the board's purview to say something like,
Okay.
take
I think
away.
I've gotten to my question. Considering it is a board policy to have that 65 and 5
It is not.
standard, it's not, but the
It's
board
not a
voted
board
on it.
policy.
Okay.
The
So-
board does not have a policy
So
to.
these folks control the policy? Is that
No,
true?
that is not.
We can supersede, we can tell them what we want them to do.
Who controls the policy?
The Board of Education. All policies have to be approved by the Board of
It's
Education.
not a policy, it's a handbook.
All right, let's, I don't know whether or not that's true. I'm gonna
Was
defer
it in the
to
board minutes?
you.
2019.
Or Jay, what did we do?
It just says that to approve, through the chair, to approve the recommendation of the athletic committee to require students to pass 5 classes of 65 or better in order to participate in sports and school-sanctioned clubs. That's what the motion.
And that was through the
I will
athletic
rescind my motion.
committee?
I will rescind my motion, I have a different motion I can make.
Okay. That was through the athletic committee? What did we do as an action for the entire board?
No, Jay just read the board minutes.
It was actually in the board minutes.
That what I just said was the minute.
He said approve the recommendation of the athletic committee. So that was the board minutes, not the
Yes.
athletic committee minutes.
I mean, I could do a little bit more research. I also was absent at that meeting, so I didn't vote for it. I just had to throw that out there. So, Mr. Garfolo and I vote for, not necessarily arbitrary.
We actually sent a copy of that of November the 19th or whenever it
Oh,
was.
yes,
It was
Yeah,
in
they're in.
2019.
Can I rescind my motion? That's not votable, right?
No, she would just have to.
Rescind the second.
my second.
I just want to keep everybody aware that we still have quite a bit of agenda left.
Yeah, but we have discussion and we're trying to figure out what a motion is, so
I'm with you.
should have done that earlier. Jay, can you read the motion from 2019 again, please, if you wouldn't mind?
Motion says. The motion was participate, it says B, participation in athletics and clubs. Mr. Jamal said it was the hope of the athletic committee to get students to strive to do better. Motion, approve the recommendation of the athletic committee to require students to pass 5 classes with a 65 or better in order to participate in sports and school-sanctioned clubs. So voted. Affirmative. Mr. Champagne, Ms. Harmeling, Dr. Hendricks, Ms. Magri, Mr. Stanek, Mr. Chamello. Opposed. Mr. Garofalo.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the high school administration to continue down the path of establishing an academic probationary period for participation in athletic and extracurricular activities.
Motion by Ms. Harmeling. Do I hear a second? Mrs. Bruno? Any discussion? My thought would be just for this year, or is this something ongoing all the time?
Ongoing, that's up to them. I don't know, I mean, this is all about keeping students engaged with school. So that to me is an ongoing thing. And I will say in middle school, at least they used to do that 2-week check-in. And that was a world of difference in terms of holding students accountable and making sure they were staying on the path. And that's just a good thing. You know what I mean?
I think there's 3 contradicting elements here, but that's just me. Anybody else? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Harmeling, second by Mrs. Bruno. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 1, 2. 6, 1, 2. Can we just get a status of how that's going, maybe at the end of the first quarter? How that's working? So that puts us to item 7E, the memorandum of understanding for the SRO.
I'd like to make a motion to table this matter till the next board meeting. And maybe you could invite the chief to.
So I have a motion to table item 7E. Mr. Hatfield, do I have a second?
Would you like for the chief to come? Basically, it's just something that's statutory. We also worked out in regards about the selection of the school resource officer with representation with a school or a district administrator.
But I couldn't.
We just have a motion to table, there's no discussion.
I second it.
Second, Stefan. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
We don't have an SRO right now, right?
There was just been one recommended. We had a principal representative. I was gone this past week. Interviews were conducted, and one of the assistant principals was, Mr. Freud was out as well. Paul Lucky was the representative who was able to sit on the interview committee. They have selected a school resource officer, but they did take input from us as a school district. So I want to commend the chief for that. That's how come I thought the memorandum was okay now since we got it resolved. But if you want him to come and.
We did have a motion.
Yes, you did.
So we don't have a motion for it, right? Or
No.
Well, I think that's kind of the trouble, is that I don't know what motion anyone's looking for.
It's a table motion, it passed 4-4-1, so, or no? Were you yes or no?
I can be a no. I'm a no.
So we tabled something without actually knowing what we were going to
We're
react to.
tabling the item to the next meeting, there's no discussion. We just move an item. So you were no, were you a? You were
I was no to tabling.
no to table. So 1, 2, 3. You yes, you were no?
No, I was yes to table.
Okay, and you abstained? Correct. Okay, so it died.
So what is that final?
So what was the final count?
It was 3, 4, 2.
3 affirmative,
3, 4,
4 opposed, and 2 abstain.
Correct. So there is no motion to table.
What?
It doesn't move, because he changes it.
No, I always said no.
Okay, so is it on the agenda or not?
It is, yes.
Okay, so could someone say what we're being asked to do with this?
Could I say something?
Sure.
In regards, it's a memorandum of understanding between the chief of police that was in your board packet. And it's good. I think it addresses all that. I just brought a hand copy up to Mr. Champagne and to Mr. Stramello. The biggest concern is making sure, and they couldn't put this in the MOU. They couldn't put this in the memorandum of agreement because of their union contract. Just to make sure that we had representation, which we did. They agreed to that. I worked it out with the chief, and it was in the email. So he did say either superintendent and or principal can be there. And they were. We had representation and went well. They come to an agreement, the chief of police, of who he's going to hire. So I think the memorandum of understanding looks good. I actually sent it to the attorney. I think that was Mr. Stamello's recommendation, and he was good with it. He just said it may specify who's paying for it, but he was fine with the memorandum of understanding. So I felt like I'd kind of done my homework and my due diligence. But if you want the chief to come and explain, that's fine as well. It was his agreement.
Through the chair.
received is 2 pages. In our board packet is 1 page. So I don't believe that we were able to, fully vet the entire MOU.
Okay.
And that was why I tabled it, and, I didn't finish because we were supposed to have discussion.
So, I was questioning this because of what I said before. When I was a principal, I was trained when this first came out and stuff there. And then I did more research, and it's all over the country, the school resource officer program is not just in the state of Connecticut. And there are districts that have specificity as far as the principal of the high school or the middle school, or wherever the school is, in their agreement to be involved in it. This did not have it. That's why I questioned Dr. Compton to question our lawyer to see, because, sometimes I don't trust if it's not written there, and I'm not doing any aspersions against the chief or anybody, but I just think that I shouldn't say we, the educators, because I'm retired, the educators know what the best match is for a building and the type of police officer that's going to be in the building. Not the way the memorandum says, it's the chairman of the police commissioner, that's the right term, right? Police commissioners, board of police commissioners, and the chief. And I do know that they say it's related to their contract, and I understand contracts, I negotiate contracts. It just makes me nervous when it's not specifically because we have a chief now, but who knows what a new chief might think. That's the reason I brought it up.
Is the MOU a new agreement?
Yes, it is,
And this was precipitated by what?
by the chief of
Okay.
police.
So it was his request that we have this agreement
Yes,
for general
most
terms?
places
And-
do have that.
Right, and the agreement that we have on the agenda, the 1 page, is the final version that you've reviewed with the police department and legal counsel.
Technically, it's 2 pages there. I don't know with the attachment. I have it here.
Okay, but was it intentional, or, I just want to make sure is it supposed to have 2 pages, or is it just a 1-page agreement?
It's basically it's a 2-page.
I just didn't know if
Yeah.
certain things, like you had mentioned, were
Right.
eliminated just because of CBA
Right.
concerns, which we have to appreciate, right? That, I get that. So I didn't know if that was intentional, that the 2nd page was not included or not.
It could have been just with the attachments that were sent around when he had sent this final version, but there it is.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
And I did have the attorney look at it.
Yeah.
It's in the email.
Thank you.
Chris, I'm not clear. Is the hard copy that Jay has in front of him the same as what we have in our packet, Dr. Compton?
No, apparently it was just 1 page.
The one that was in
No, I
the
understand,
email,
forget page length. Is the content the same?
Yes, it's
the
the
email
additional.
that we received have both of these. What's in the attachment is only this first page. But it's not the official, I don't know how you would look at it. I mean, the email, I guess we would base it off the email that we received
To
earlier.
answer your question, what's in the packet is not what was in the email.
Right.
It was just 1 page, and something happened with the attachment that was in your board packet. This email was sent to the attorney, sent to Ed, sent to Chris, possibly Jay, the leadership team for sure. And that's when Mr. Stamello said, Dr. Compton, please send this on to the attorney. I did. He said it looked fine. He just said, clarify, just make sure you know exactly who's paying for the expense.
So
But
the
he was
email-
fine with the MOU.
So the email that Chris and Ed and Jay saw, we didn't get that email.
Well, the attachment,
No.
you didn't. Something happened with the attachment in the board packet. I
Say
can,
it again, Beth?
July 15th, there was an email sent to the entire board that includes the attachment of the MOU, which is 2 pages.
and that's what I sent first.
trying to table it so that we were all on the same page, because again, as we learned earlier this evening, that if we're not reading everything, you know, we could get into a situation where we are crossing each other, you know, and so I wasn't sure who all saw the second page. So I was just trying to be
I'm glad
proactive.
you clarified that, Jay, because like I said, extensively back and forth with the chief, I got it straightened out. I held my ground, just like Mr. Stamello had said, and the chief was very gracious, and we were included in the interview process. He just said he couldn't put it in the MOU because it would conflict with the union agreement. But if you'd like, I mean, we can bring it back in September and he can come and address the board. But it's just,
I'd like to
there it
make a
is.
motion to accept the MOU that was shared with this board in an email July 15th.
I'll second it.
Motion by Ms. Harley, second by Beth. Any other questions?
I have one, a couple, actually. I don't know how, on the second page, how number 2, the SRO shall assist school officials with the enforcement of BOE policies and procedures regarding student conduct. And number 8, SROs shall not act as school disciplinarians or impose any punishments on students for violations of school rules or policy. That responsibility is the sole function of school administrators. Those sound somewhat contradictory to me.
Technically, they're not allowed. And Mr. Floyd, you want to comment on that? Because there's exact things of what they can do and can't do.
The responsibility of implementing the Board of Education policies governing discipline and thing is the responsibility of the school administration and
Yes.
teachers in the building. The SRO is there to create presence and goes beyond school policies. So, for example, you know, anything involving controlled substance, that then goes beyond our own control, and that's what it's important the SRO is there, because they have our help, you know, they can manage that.
Sure, I agree with you. That doesn't sound like what number 2 is saying, though. Number 2, the SRO shall assist school officials with the enforcement of BOE policies and procedures regarding student conduct.
Right, those are the types of things that wouldn't be, so when there's a fight, for example, the SRO, we're dependent upon him to help us break it up often enough, or when there's drug involvement, or when we're doing a sexual investigation involving inappropriate behavior among students. We involve the SRO in those things because it doesn't also impact, and it's impacting the local law.
Right, still with you?
Yeah.
Still wondering why the wording of BOE policies and procedures is in there if what we're asking the SRO to do rises to criminal or potentially criminal activity. And this isn't for you to answer necessarily, I'm just,
Basically, that'd be a good question for our attorney. It's a situation sometimes too, how they, with these contracts of how they're written and what the role of the school resource officer is.
I mean, just his presence in the cafeteria is helping us implement board policies. Look at it versus level like that, his presence in the hallways.
And I think the word assist and not
There's the key.
enforce is one of those lawyer words.
Yes, it is.
Could I just,
okay.
for the clarification, yes, number 2 says assist with the enforcement. Number 8 is about imposing punishment. So they actually are different. One is about assisting with enforcement, one is about imposing punishment, and the SRO cannot impose school punishment. They
Right.
certainly impose criminal punishment or criminal.
Fair
things.
enough. One further question is item 3, the SRO shall provide classroom instruction if requested to do so. Is there an example of this?
Yes, they do some classes,
Yeah,
Mr.
they go
Floyd.
into the civics classes, the social studies classes, and as well as health classes, to assist with presentation.
Okay.
That's okay with our school union, our teachers union, that language?
Yes.
Teacher classes.
So,
Okay.
your motion, second, I believe?
Beth?
Beth, yes. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Stefan, Jay?
I didn't vote.
Oh, we have an abstention.
Yeah.
Motion carries 6-1. Next up, shared services agreement. I don't know, Dr. Compton,
Well, the
That's us.
only,
between the two of you.
yeah, this is something, if you want to table it till next month, this is a situation of where with all three, I know there had been discussion and we talked about the role of the human resource person with the town and really making this also a part of the board agreement and the town agreement. These agreements, as you know, are for 1 year only, and this was to include Chris Pelosi as well. In regards, I think I also sent you, Mr. Bucci and I worked actually on the financial breakdown of the three. I think this is a good agreement. The human resource person's done a good job, and I think it's a better way to make them more an official part of the shared service agreement. They've never really been officially a part of the shared service agreement. As a town employee, this person's been doing this stuff for several years, and I think, Jay, Mr. Hatfield, you had kind of thought this would be important too, to look at as a possibility of a shared service agreement, because he's also a person who's working with us with negotiations, and I just think from a legal standpoint, it's best. I know in the past, there was never agreement. It was just like, he's a town employee, but, you know, falling under that jurisdiction of the umbrella.
I have one question.
Yes.
Mr. Connor stays the same. Mr. Dyer's responsibility goes down 30%.
It's like 50-50 across the boards.
Are we saying that we don't utilize Mr. Dyer today at an 80% rate?
Mr. Dyer is outstanding. I can't talk about personnel. It's just a situation with just looking at the equal, they all themselves would like to be considered in the same proportion of a shared service agreement with 50-50. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Chris, the way this agreement was structured, the way it exists currently, is we were paying 50-50 for Tim Connors, and we were paying 80% of Rob Dyer.
80-20.
Or 80-20. So when the conversation began about adding Mr. Pelosi to this, we said, well, why don't we pay 20% for Mr. Pelosi since we're already paying 80% for Mr. Dyer?
That was our
And then
first.
when we finally came down to doing the analysis, we said, why don't we just pay 50-50 for all three of these guys? And it turns out to be a $300 difference in our favor.
You still do the work.
And it gives us an agreement in which, to your point, to your question, were we actually getting 80% of Mr. Dyer? I don't know. Were we going to get 20% of Mr. Pelosi? I don't know that either. I can tell you this. We're probably going to get 50% of each one of these three individuals. And so in trying not to make this even more cumbersome than it already was, with an 80-20, 20-80, and 50-50, which had no basis in anything, we said, let's just make it 50% across the board. And it turns out, when you do the equation that way, it's a $300 difference overall for all three people. And it seems to just make a lot more sense than trying to justify 80%ers and 20%ers and whatever, because I don't even know how you would do that.
And all three of them, you know, it's worked out. It's worked out well.
And for my 2 cents, all three do a tremendous job for the Board of Ed.
I have to echo that as well. We're not to be discussing personnel, but yes.
How about if I said, they fulfill an essential job for the Board of Ed that we would otherwise not be able to fill for the same kind of money.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Well said. Well said.
I'll ask a question. I think I may have a concern some other people might have, or maybe not. I'm wondering if this creates some sort of power dynamic that will sway away from our favor and lead to some of these individuals being deprioritized when it comes to school issues.
Well, Basically with the agreement is.
And I know that's not what you want.
That's right.
And then, but it feels
That's
like we
right,
might be
Steph.
putting some of this out of our control a little bit this way. But it does seem fair as presented.
And I think that was the big concern when we did this last year. There's a lot of crossing out and whatnot, and I believe the last agreement was that any party can make a change prior to January 31st. So I would.
It's a yearly thing.
So for the following year. So I would say if you feel that any one of these three aren't holding up their end of the bargain, let us know and we can revisit that. I mean, that's how it's written, if we agree.
I think it's been a good team with the schools board, school system, and the town. And they're three great people.
Yeah, I'm just rereading stuff, and it says, to Stefan's point, you know, the report to the town director of operations and superintendent of schools, but then it goes on to say, in event of a conflict between town versus board priorities, the town director of operations and the superintendent of schools shall confer for the purpose of resolving any such conflict. That, not being a lawyer, that sounds strong to me, but I don't know.
Again, that's almost where you need an attorney and.
As it relates to my question, I think that since we have an opportunity to revisit this in a couple of months, I think we go in, that everybody's going to give their best faith effort to make this work. So I'm good with it.
All right, well, what is the board's pleasure here?
Make a motion to accept the shared services agreement as presented.
So I have a motion by Ms. Harlan. Second. Second by Mr. Bohuniak. You beat you. Any further discussion?
Just to Mr. Bohuniak's point that, through the chair, if we don't add it to the agenda, then it automatically renews. So, I just want to make sure that we understand that piece there, that there is no chain, we have to act for it to be reviewed. And I think that's something that we have not necessarily been too diligent in prior years. Is actually looking at it and saying, are we getting 80-20? Are we getting 50-10, whatever it was? And the secondary thing is, I think we do need to address at some point the fact, we're paying 50% for something that I don't think was clearly in the budget. So I'm not really sure how we got there, but I do want to see how we got there. When we presented our budget,
Right.
I didn't see a lot of discussion for
Well, I believe that the Human Resources Director, we had 20% in the budget, to be honest, and the IT Director, we had 80.
80,
So we're
and the other
lowering
one was
one to 30,
50-50.
raising the other up to 50.
Right.
If I could make a comment, when you approved the reallocation of funds back on July the 11th, these amounts were included in that budget reallocation in total. As, like I said, it was a $300 difference between you doing an 80-20-20, 80-50-50, and doing a straight 50-50 across the board. That $300 was actually to our favor. So it didn't actually cost us any more money to go to 50-50, it actually cost us slightly less. And Jay, if I could address your point, this I think goes to something that I need to put on the table, or the business manager needs to put on the table when we start preparing the new budget. Just like we look at every other position that we have within the district and say, are we renewing this, are we renewing that, are we renewing the shared services agreement? And I think it's incumbent on me to make sure that it's put in front of you so that you can consider this. Not that you're supposed to try to remember this. I mean, this is something I think is part of the budget process.
Just agreements.
And then if I could just have one more follow-up, I know there's been some preliminary discussions about some of these things, but I really would like to see on the business side us to really utilize the human resources piece for and I guess I'm encouraging Mr. Bucci to do it, but for have to budget for that in the next coming year, you know, whether a little tiny bit, you know, let's do that. But let's make sure that we have as many resources as possible that we can provide to our employees through this new endeavor. You know, and I'm not sure who that would fall under to be tasked with that, but
Technically falls under Chris Pelosi in regards from the Human Resource and Working Superintendent and some financial stuff with Mr. Bucci, but it's really been an asset. It's a good point.
All right, anything else on this? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed, 9-0. Up next, debate club coach at the middle school.
I would just like to make clear the process of the union contract was followed and abide. We did our due diligence in regards with making sure it was posted. People had the right within the district to apply. So therefore, I just want you to know that as I also sent out a little memo about this as well, that everything had been followed with due diligence and the posting, and Mr. Catlin submitted the application, the letters, and all of that kind of stuff. No other person applied, and so we followed union contract and making sure that it was posted and they have rights to the first preference.
So I heard, Mr. Stanek shared that there was precedent previously, going back a ways. I really very clearly remember a conversation when we did not have an advisor for our drama club, and we did not have a drama program, and this board asked the question, can someone from the community be that advisor? And we were told no, because there is no certification process like there is for a coach, right? There's a state certification process for a coach. So I just want to understand, because it makes me kind of sad that we didn't do this for the drama club, because our kids didn't have a drama program because there was no teacher. But I'm positive we were told that you could not hire a non-sports appendix E position or do whatever. So I have no problem with this. I just want clarity moving forward, because it gives us a lot more flexibility than we have. Heck, we could have a cooking class. We could have lots of things.
Yeah,
Not class,
I think the verbiage in the contract that I have here is that we have to give first consideration to teachers.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't see any.
But do you understand what I mean?
No,
You're not acknowledging what I just said.
No, I get you.
Clearly we were. Oh, no.
I think, my opinion on this is to take no action and to just let it be as it is, that, there was nobody from the teachers union, so there is no necessarily conflict. I think the clarification here could possibly be the fact that we have a candidate who is a certified teacher, that just as if we had a candidate who didn't necessarily come to our district but wanted to be who was a certified teacher for homebound instruction, possibly. I don't know if we necessarily take people who are not currently up-to-date certified. I think that's where some of the
It just needs to be clarified, that's all.
That's
I have no problem with this, I'm not opposed to this at all, but do you remember that conversation when we were told no?
We just legally need to, though, to just,
Well, again, I think the
hire
certification piece might be a
It did
factor,
not
but I'm
come
not
up.
sure. Yeah, I don't remember that piece. But that's what I imagine could be, because even as a coach, right, I'm a certified coach, but I can't go out there, and coach an info. But I would advise taking no action and continue to do it as needed or case by case.
We'd need to just hire him as the coach, though, because,
Right, because he's not an employee.
because he will be going and traveling with the team. He has to have a certification. He's on the, he's qualified to do this. He's been there, done that for many years, 25 years. So I'd just like to get the board's support.
I think I know,
how we
we
can.
have, we don't typically
Right, and this is what I, through the chair.
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
This is
so
that-
that gray area
Okay.
that we need to work on as a
Okay.
policy committee.
Okay.
Gray. We approve
Okay.
hires of people who don't work in the school system.
Well, this is,
But we don't necessarily vote on it, and that's what,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like, so we're doing the same thing later tonight, but we're
Okay.
not voting on
Okay.
it. We're not actually taking a vote. If we wanna do that, then we need to do it all the time. If we don't wanna do that, then we don't do it.
I'm not.
So could we add that item to the
that's
information
exactly where,
section of the agenda?
Yes,
right.
where the superintendent does the summer hiring process under the,
And I would recommend moving that to section, oh boy, 8C, no, 8, no, I was right, 8C4C.
under hiring.
Yeah, or just the 2A section.
Yes.
You don't have to do anything. I don't understand what we're doing. Discussion and possible action. We discussed. We didn't make an action.
Just move it down to information. Under hiring.
So can I make a motion
Yes.
to add an item to the agenda? Section 8, item 5A, Appendix E positions. Appendix D positions. And under information, that Harvey Catlin be hired as the debate team coach.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bruno, second by Jay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? 9-0. We're just gonna move that down.
Yes.
Good?
Got it.
All right, so in that section 8, we have all of the information. Any questions or anything on that? All right, moving on. Section 9, the comment section. I don't have much. I believe the cave thing is the 18th of this month. I don't know if anybody has signed up besides myself and I believe Mr. Stramello. Have you signed up? Is that still open or is that
Yes,
closed?
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
a
anyone-
summer institute.
So if anyone wants to participate, reach out to Leanne.
Thursday, the 18th.
It's in
Water's Edge, I think.
Water's Edge, and it includes a supper. It could be good and it could be bad.
Also, don't forget about registering for the for the school board conference.
Right. My second thing is let's get something on the calendar for policy stuff for September.
Yes, and we would like to also,
Maybe even a separate night from the Monday if need be, even if it's before the next meeting, we could do that. And the reason why is, I don't know if everybody's received this. Beth brought it to my attention, it wasn't being mailed to me. This is a 38-page book of laws that changed this year. And a lot of them
affect school districts.
started July 1st, and we have, I mean, this was just mailed. So I'm going to give this to Dr. Compton,
Right.
she's gonna scan it, and pass this on to Floyd. I'd like him to take a look at it too,
Right.
just to make sure that everything we're doing is supposed to be doing. One of the things that really stuck out to me in this one is they've extended, and correct me if I'm wrong, special ed, adult programming to the age of 22.
yes, yes, and new IEP changes as well.
Along with a lot of other,
That's why too, with policy, it's very important that when you have the policy committee, that they come back and in regards that we have CAG do a thorough policy audit and bring all of the policies up to date. We talked about that and we definitely need to do that and have that on the September agenda. But let the policy committee do that first, that's their area.
That's it for me. Go around.
I just have a quick point of
Sure.
order thing. I know that we are out of discussion and possible action, but I failed to ask to add something to the agenda that the transfer request, Chris, so if you don't think we need to do it, that's fine, but.
No, we need to
I
do
missed
that.
it.
We did need to do that,
So
so,
am I okay to,
yeah.
all right. So I'd like to add to the agenda, discussion and possible action of a transfer request from the Board of Education to the town of Seymour. That's not my official
Yes.
motion, that's my motion to put that topic on the agenda.
Second.
So motion by Kristen, second by Jay. Any discussions on adding that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 9-0.
So this is after Mr. Bucci, and I can't remember if I mentioned it during the, I think I did during my catching up on the meeting. So this is in response to Mr. Bucci finalizing July numbers. If you recall, back in June, we made a motion to approve a transfer request to cover our shortfall that was primarily driven by our health insurance numbers. Now that the books are fairly done, the amount of that has changed. It has gone up a bit. Town is already alerted to this, so this is about giving authorization for our chair to sign that transfer request. So I'd like to make a motion to approve a transfer request from the town fund balance to the Board of Education in the amount of $629,000, negating the previous transfer request approved by this board in June.
Motion by Ms. Harling, second by Mrs. Steryak. Any questions?
Mainly due to legal costs that were not included for payment.
All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 9-0. Okay, back to comments. Go down this way and then down that way. Anything, Jay? Beth? Kristen? Shannon? You can leave, I know you got to run.
I just have a question that I meant to bring up last time but forgot. Is there a reason that we've gone away from a second public comment session at the end of the meeting?
I just,
Is it not a town policy to have two?
no.
You don't have to have, but you
I
can.
know you don't have to legally, but I believe the town has a policy of having two.
If that is the case, if you could send it my way, we'll add it. I don't think that's an issue.
Okay.
Are you all set? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You all set?
I'm just of the belief we should have two, and I believe the town, that's the town policy, but I could be wrong.
Okay, there's a question about the progress, and I see Mr. Stanek, who's chair here of the committee transferring the central office to the Board of Ed. Just my question is, as I was walking today, and I went by that area, I didn't see a lot of action, and I know it's August 1st. So I'm concerned if we're, because I lived through it once before with Mr. Floyd when he was assistant, when they did the renovation in the high school, and it's not fun. So I'm just hoping that we're ready for when the kids come back, that we don't have banging and hammering and cars and all that kind of stuff. And I know that we're having a meeting August 9th. Mr. Stanek? Okay, so obviously we'll get an update there, but I'm just wondering if Dr. Compton knows anything through Mr. Connors of the progress.
I just know that it's been a few weeks since I've been up to the high school, and my last visit, I guess, was about 2 weeks. There's been progress made in getting the rooms as far as the bulletin boards and all that stuff off. Mr. Stanek knows a better update than I do.
Sure.
The work has been delayed because quite frankly, no one wants to work. The quotes and the requests for proposals, people are not submitting quotes or proposals for
that's what I thought, but, you know, I wanted, that's what I figured.
Not been a lot of movement. Been a few
Yep,
things done.
yep, yep.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
No. Jim?
No.
Kristen?
I know it's not a dialogue, but I guess I'm just not following the process, right? If we put stuff out to bid and someone gave us a price, that, it's okay, I'll follow up. But it's just a little, like, I hear what you're saying, shortage of people, but if we came up with a price somehow, so didn't it go out to bid and didn't we get bids back? And I know it's not a discussion, so we can follow up on it later. But my quick comment is just to, I was gonna raise that issue, Stefan, as well, that I don't know why it disappeared, and I would also like to ask our chair to include his board members in decisions like that, because while yes, you work with the superintendent to put together the agenda, it would be nice to have some input, and that kind of applies to other parts of the agenda as well. Our whole discussion and motion section of the agenda tonight, it was not clear what we were being asked to do, and that resulted in a lot of extra time for discussion because we didn't know what we were being asked to do.
That I don't totally agree with. There were several follow-up things I did do.
It still was not apparent what we were being asked to do or what the proper format of a recommended motion might be. So I would just ask that we get a little more information as to what the
We
ask
have
is.
this get emailed to us before every
We
meeting.
had the recommended
Okay, so
motions.
then it's like, what are you supposed to look at? There's
Well, one
no
of the-
reason why we don't put recommended motions, even some context. I mean, if you think about what the public sees, the public has no idea what we're gonna talk about. They just see debate team, they just
Have
see
you-
extracurriculars.
Have you seen other agendas
I
in this
don't care
town?
about other agendas. I'm talking about the Board of Education. I'm
Yeah.
talking about us.
We only need to highlight things. The more information that gets put on topics, the more we get limited.
That's extraordinarily, I cannot disagree with that more. I cannot disagree with that more. Especially for a regular meeting where you can add whatever you want to a regular meeting.
Sure, that can happen. Dr. Compton, I know we're.
I'm just going to be very brief because my evaluation, beginning process of that starts after. I'd just like to mention the ESY program. Let's talk about student achievement real fast. The ESY programs went extremely well. Allison Brett's done a great job as a coordinator. There's 2 more weeks for the children, for kids that are doing additional help and support. The literacy and math summer programs have went well, and also with the ELL students. I'll have Ms. Tenza give a more extensive report next month. So I just want to emphasize that. The summer programs have went well, and especially ESY. I've been over there a few times, visited all the classrooms, and just a job well done to the staff and everybody that's been involved. Our administrative retreat is going to be scheduled for August the 16th. We're trying to get a conference room up with the Connecticut basement systems up from the Industrial Parkway. New teacher orientation will be August 25th and 26th. We want to invite the board, so we'll send out notices about that. I know Mr. Stamella, you always like to come and speak to the new teachers, but also we'll invite the Board of Ed as well. So that's going to be on a Thursday and Friday. So I just want to give you those updates in regards with that, and also about the policy committee that we want to get that scheduled ASAP.
Any questions? All righty, we are moving on to item 10.
I'll make a motion that the board enter an executive session for discussion of the employment, performance, and evaluation of the superintendent of schools. Further move that Dr. Susan Compton be invited to participate in the executive session.
So I have a motion by Ed, second by Beth. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
I'm abstaining from that vote because I'm not able to stay. So apologies. I know this is an important conversation much on the plate just to continue to stay, so, all right, good night, everybody.
I think you'll have more input in September too.
Okay, great, thank
Yeah, I
you.
think they'll be doing things in September as a
Okay,
final.
thanks.
All right, so we will move into executive session at 9:44.